it's like, I wish I was special enough to be, you know,
now you
interviewed by like Mark Maron. It's like, well, Steve, you're not famous. Well,
could be.
Could be.
New York, 7 years. How long were you in Denver before that? Because you kind of have been going back and forth in Denver a little bit.
Well, I was born and raised in Denver. Then I went to school in Chicago, Loyola University. And then I went to UNC, Northern Colorado, where we met, right, for grad school. And then after grad school, I moved back to Denver, and I was there for 4 years, I guess.
Is that really it?
Yeah, and then moved out here because I graduated 2008 from UNC, and then I moved to New York in 2012. So yeah, so 4 years.
That's really weird because I always felt like you were there longer than that.
It does feel like it was longer than that. Yeah. I mean, I guess I was kind of back and forth. Like, you could sort of consider UNC in that time frame as well. Like, you know, so really I was back in Colorado like 6 years after college.
But you didn't do a ton in Denver at UNC, right?
What do you mean?
Well, like you weren't like going back and forth while you were going to grad school.
I mean, a little bit. Like, you know, I would go home to do laundry and stuff like every, you know, couple weeks or something, and then I wasn't really gigging in Denver at that time.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, I can't really remember what Denver was like while I was at school. So what was the scene there like during that time period?
I think there was definitely a lot happening. Like, you know, the main clubs at that time were like Dazzle, which is still around, Chapultepec, which is like not really doing jazz anymore, Herbs, but Herbs you have to be like an organ player because they don't have, you know, they just have the organ there. So that
they
was
have a house organ?
Yeah, they got a B3 in there. Yeah. So that's Vlad Gershevich, who's playing there all the time. And then I think other, you know, organ players. But and then there was Chapultepec 2, which was randomly around for a minute, that had jam sessions and stuff. But I think, you know, there was a decent scene, and a lot of the scene in Denver was, you know, the college professors that were, you know, the Eric Gunnisons and the John Gunthers and the, you know, Peter Summers and Paul Romaines, you know, those guys did a lot of gigging, and then maybe there was some younger, like, kind of in school or fresh out of school faces. But I think Denver's been like a pretty good jazz scene, especially for its size.
Well, it's gotten better too, right? Like it's grown.
Yes.
Because now they have Nocturne and
there's Nocturne and there's Crimson Room and like there's other spots as well. It's interesting. I mean, I think. Sorry, John, my ride's here. I gotta go. I think, you know, there definitely is like a vibrant scene there. A lot of really talented jazz musicians. Other kinds of music, maybe not as much, but I guess I don't know.
Really? You
I mean,
think jazz is the more dominant or more healthy scene?
Yeah, well, or no, I guess that's not true. I just feel like there's some scenes that are missing, that aren't like as prevalent.
Well, like what?
Well, like R&B and soul and, you know, gospel stuff, but it's probably there and I just never knew. So there's that.
That's true. I don't think you were really seeking that out.
Right, yeah. Right. It was like all jazz at that point.
What do your parents do about?
My mom was a kindergarten teacher for 40 years, Denver Public Schools.
Wow.
Yeah, and my dad owned a small business, like a electronics stereo equipment, fixing and installing stereo equipment. When people used to buy stereo systems, that's what he did. So the gramophone shop was his business. And so, both kind of like, I'd say, middle class, maybe lower middle class, like family, 2 older brothers, lived in Washington Park, which is now this like
Swanky.
so swanky, and there's no way my parents could afford to live there if in current day, but yeah.
They're both retired now.
Yes, exactly. They're both retired and just kind of living it up.
What happened to the shop? Did he sell the shop to somebody? Or?
No, he finally just closed it down, actually fairly recently. It had morphed. I mean, originally it was like more of sales, like commercial, and then it went into more like fixing gear and installing stuff. But he owns that the property, the building, so he like rents out that building and just.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so they're always going to have a nice.
Hopefully. I mean, it's at the whims of lots of things, though. Like tax rates, and if you can find somebody to rent the spot and all that. But right now, it's fine.
Did you ever pick up on any of the electronic fixing, or
not really? No. And my dad and the middle brother Kevin, they're both like really handy. They just can. If you got like a leak in the john, they can fix that. And so I've always been envious of that because they're both that way. And I think I actually probably have it more than most people do, but I'm still like kind of an idiot when it comes to a lot of things.
Can you at least fix your gear, and if something goes out, and maybe not your keyboard, but like if you have a pedal that goes out because of a connection, could you?
Maybe. I mean, I could count the number of times I've used a soldering iron, so probably not. But I know a few things here or there. And I had to run sound when I worked at Dazzle. So I know a little bit of like the audio engineering. But again, it's just the bastardized version of probably what it's supposed to be. So
I didn't know that you ran sound at Dazzle too.
Yeah,
do they still have the booking house guy doing that, or did they finally get their own sound engineer?
I think it's all of the above still. But the way that job originally was designed was you'd book the music and then you'd also work the shows. So you would run sound, seat guests, bus tables.
Oh.
Yeah, all of the above.
Oh, wow.
So that's what made that job challenging, and kind of like, when people got on my case about something, it was just, I had very little patience because it's like, hey man, I'm trying,
You're doing
like
everything in the
I had to pick up so-and-so from the airport and like take them to their Kuvo interview, and now the wait staff doesn't want to take a drink order from one of the band members, or some, just like really petty, stupid things.
So you were very far beyond the just regular venue manager.
Right, yeah, it was all of the above, and part of that was just necessary because the club, the club had a lot of expenses, and it's like, it's expensive to run a jazz club, and it's not very profitable. So that's just kind of how it was designed. And also, Dazzle, I mean, the brief history of Dazzle is like, it started as a fine dining restaurant. And Miles Snyder was like the original owner, and he was more of a restaurateur, but he also was like an avid jazz fan, and he would like play jazz recordings in the restaurant. And then eventually it was like, oh, well, let's like book some jazz musicians. And then suddenly it started having music more and more. And then, by the time I got there, it was like, okay, we're, booking 7 nights a week of music, and we're trying to get, touring acts to come in. And so the club like went from being more of a restaurant into more of a jazz club.
Which is a club full time.
Right, yeah.
It's like almost no restaurant.
Yeah, now it's the opposite because
it's like the touring club Denver, right? Like,
Yes, yeah, for the most part, if you're a jazz musician and you're going, if you have a name and you're going through Denver, you'd probably play at Dazzle. So, but yeah, and they moved locations. Now they're downtown. They didn't used to be, and that's brought with it, other things. So,
do you like the new room?
I do and don't. I mean, I think it's like got a lot of benefits over the old room, but then at the same time it's lost some of the intimacy from the original club, because the original club really honestly felt like a New York jazz club. It was like intimate and kind of imperfect in a way. There was that big pole in the middle and the stage was right next to the kitchen, but those little idiosyncrasies kind of were endearing, especially when you come to New York and you like go to Smoke or you go to Village Vanguard or any of these places. Like, they all are quirky and kind of don't work totally well.
They're just kind of like weird, crummy rooms.
Yes, great. Right, and they've just like stood the test of time because they've just become those spots for like great music.
Would you get back into the jazz club game, like if you were offered a more central role, like beyond the small petty things, like if you were to manage a club?
Probably not. No, I don't think so. To have to worry about the bottom line all the time is miserable, and it's something that is like gets in the way of like enjoying the music. I mean, I remember lots of times booking a band that was incredible that nobody showed up to, or the opposite. You like book something that's kind of, you feel like is stupid, and then people are eating it up, and so that's not fun. But I suppose never say never if I have to.
But did you get a lot of leeway in the booking, or did you?
Yes, I did, absolutely. Right, I had a lot of leeway. Part of it, the hard part was booking so many touring acts was just a lot of work in terms of like picking them up, getting the hotels and all, renting the bass. And so it was nice to not have to do that anymore when I quit.
But they weren't like a booking nightmare. It was the other things. In terms of
typically, yes.
Because some of those guys book 7-8 months in advance.
Yeah, and most of them go through an agency. You're dealing with, there's like a handful of agencies, and they might be different now, I don't know, but they kind of book them, and they were always usually booking because the group was going out west or coming back from Seattle or California or wherever. So how did you get that gig anyways? I don't think we ever talked about it.
Well, because Tyler did it before you, right?
Yeah, Tyler Gilmore was the booker before me, and I can't remember actually how he got the gig. I suppose you could ask him. And then he was looking to kind of step down, and he had gone to UNC like before our time, but he had gone, and so just I think a mutual acquaintance was like, hey, you should hit up Steve Denny because he'd be good, because he does what he's told.
You were good.
Well,
I remember.
I mean,
you weren't terrible on the mic.
Yeah, well, yes, I was good on the mic, though I did get complaints sometimes that I was like, too showy on the microphone.
Too showy?
Well, that like I was like, sometimes I like maybe kidded around too much, or somebody had a complaint that I was like too matter of fact about it being a listening room, like, and telling people to be quiet.
Well, this is funny because you're basically reading from a card.
Yeah, I mean, right, I had the same spiel all the time. But that's where, customer service meets, like, the needs of the club. It's like, well, we need, this room exists because it's a listening environment, but not everybody wanted to obey.
I mean, what did you take from
A lot, really. I think it provided me an opportunity to like be immersed in the Denver jazz scene in a way that I probably never would have been otherwise. So I ended up knowing a lot of people simply because of the job I did. And that just wouldn't have been the same had I not been able to do that job. I think it gave me a glimpse at like what musicians do well and what they don't do well. And like with each individual, you know, it's like, wow, this person's really good at doing this thing, or wow, this person really, they've got their thing, but they're, you know, kind of miserable to be around, or just gave me some kind of ideas about how to conduct myself as a gigging musician. And then also just from the playing side, like being able to see really incredible musicians play all the time. You know, I'm sure I benefited from that musically.
So why Loyola? Was it just a need to get out of the state, or?
Yeah, it was just a need to get out of Colorado, and it's funny, I didn't really do a good job of like researching schools and thinking about what I wanted to do. It just was like, I just kind of was like, well, Loyola sent me this letter, and I guess I'll apply there, and Chicago sounds cool. And my dad had gone to Chicago a number of times for business. Like, he always really liked Chicago. I was like, oh, you should go. So that's what I did. And it was an interesting environment because it's not a music school. It never has been, and probably never will be. I mean, it's like a pre-med kind of sciencey, well, and also like liberal arts. Those are big there. So the music department at Loyola was originally Loyola didn't have a music department, and this other college that was on the same campus called Mundelein College, that was a college for nuns, for Blessed Virgin Mary order nuns, got like swallowed up by Loyola, and so the music department was all nuns. My teachers were all nuns. Sister Judith, Sister Eliza, Sister Dorothy.
How did that work?
It was fun. I actually
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, it was kind of a funny experience. Like, but you know, at that point in time, I just didn't know anything. I didn't know I wanted to do jazz. I didn't know I have always been musical, and I've always wanted to do music, but stuff didn't like really come together for me until college. You know, it just kind of was like, I don't know.
So you knew like vaguely what you wanted to do, and you just kind of...
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, I'll do music, or the other thing I wanted to do was film. I wanted to be an auteur.
Did you ever really get into that? Like in high school, did you ever try to do anything?
Well, John, how much time do you have?
I have plenty of time.
We're going to get the whole story about the Wizards Actors Guild. So, my oldest brother Ian was quite the thespian. Like, he was very into theater. His undergrad was in theater, and you know, very very early on, like, we had gotten this camcorder and started making home movies. And you know, we would write little scripts and we'd film our home movies and we'd edit them. And you know, it was like our whole group of friends that would do these movies. And so, and this is like way before, you know, it's like now you can make like a decent looking movie on your iPhone and edit it with iMovie and all this stuff.
Isn't there a movie on Netflix, like some kid in New York actually did that?
Probably.
Made a whole movie on his iPhone or something?
Probably.
Anyways.
Yeah, so it's like nowadays, you know, but back then you had your camcorder, and so we were really into that. And I was into that, and I was into acting, and I was into filmmaking, and so that was another interest that I wanted to pursue. But I I think music was always kind of the thing that I loved most.
Yeah. It's funny that you said it because, like, my other choice when I was going into college would have been creative writing, specifically scripting.
Okay.
Like, I also tried like 4 times in high school to make a movie.
Screenplay?
Yeah. I got as far as like half a script with a friend.
Yeah. Did you ever have a Final Draft, that program?
No, not Final Draft.
Final Draft was like, Microsoft Word, but for screenplays. So it like automatically did the formatting in like the middle, like it is,
like So you wouldn't have to like center everything.
Exactly. Yeah. It all did it for you, and then write how the scene titles and all that would be a certain way. So my friend. So either way, a friend of ours, like growing up, she was a friend of my brother Ian's, Gray Drake, who's now Mrs. Movie Phone. Like if you see Miss Movie Phone, she's like got this pink hair and she does interviews with celebrities and shit. Yeah, and so she was part of the Wizards Actors Guild, and she's the one who like gave me that Final Draft. But she also got really into film. Like she went, to school for it, moved out to LA, and was able to like make a career of it. So I mean, you like the entire process, or you wanted to be the behind the scenes? I liked all of it. I mean, I liked acting, and I liked writing and directing and producing. I mean, I was into all of that stuff. And I did do some film stuff in college. There was like a film professor at Loyola that I took a bunch of classes from, did some work with. But man, talk about like being more unforgiving than being a musician. Like being like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to be a filmmaker? Or how are you going to be an actor? Like that just seems to me an even harder career prospect than being a musician.
I can see that.
Just seeing if the cops were looking at me.
No, I think you're good. I think you have the bag of camouflage.
Mm-hmm.
So then, would you really consider the UNC thing to be your first schooling in a way?
Yes.
Like, because you actually wanted to do it?
Yeah. I didn't know a lot about jazz. I mean, I had done jazz band in high school, and then I took jazz lessons from this really great pianist in Chicago, Chris White is his name. And he was awesome. I mean, he showed me a lot of stuff. But yeah, it wasn't until UNC that I really got schooled and kind of. So I was behind the curve, to be honest. Like, it's like I was going into grad school, and I probably played like a freshman undergrad. Like I just was not very good. But I was motivated to like get better, and I did. But it was, it was a process.
Were you a TA?
I was a TA, yeah.
I know that has a different meaning at UNC just because there's a lot of them too.
Yeah, and I think I was that first year of them having a bunch more TAs that like didn't do teaching stuff. And so I mostly did like schlepping of gear around. That second year I taught a jazz piano class, like the intro jazz for like the undergrad jazz majors. I don't know if you had to take that.
I don't think I know. Well, I was spared all piano classes.
Okay.
So I actually took
Lucky
one.
you. Yeah.
That was it. But I mean, how did you like your 2 years?
It was great. I feel like UNC was a really good experience, and it was like it was good. I learned a lot. I got a lot better as a musician, so I can't complain. I mean, it was Greeley, but other than that, It was a very good experience, and it was it was hard at first because I was like a grad student and I kind of sucked, and so that was like
but you
awkward.
earned your keep. It's like by the end you were in like lap 1.
It's true. Yes. Yeah. Like I got ahead of the curve eventually and made a lot of progress, which is what you want, right? It's like, if you're already an incredible musician and you're going to school, it's like, well, what's this really about,
So what was it that did it for you? Like, because a lot of people, their stumbling block is the technical skill, but if you went to school for classical performance your first time, right?
Yeah, Loyola was more classical.
So then, was it the language that you had to overcome? And
yes. Yeah.
And how'd you do it? Is it just by tearing through the library?
That was part of it. I think some of it was like a lot of work with articulation and like swinging, and playing in the pocket and doing, just really like dialing in the rhythmic side of things. And then yes, language, and that took me a while to comprehend. Like I had been transcribing, but it wasn't doing me a whole lot of good until I figured out how to take bits of transcription and like force them into my solos. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it sounds stupid, but that's the only way that I was able to like develop my own language, was literally just like, you playing something on repeat and it's like, okay, in bar 4, like I'm always going to play this one lick, I'm just going to hit it every time. And then after a while, then it's like, oh, okay, I see how this works. And that's still how I learn. Like I still...
You basically force yourself into doing it.
Yes, exactly. Right, yeah. You like, and practice ways into getting into the lick, getting in and out of the lick.
So then, how do you get past the kind of robotic sense of that? Is it really just through time for you?
Yeah.
Just kind of living with something for a while?
Yeah, exactly. Right, and just knowing it inside and out to where that can just come up at any given point. I suppose it's still a little contrived, maybe. But I think I would rather just sound good, even if it's a little contrived or cliche, than to like try and pretend I'm, fucking Sonny Rollins or something.
So who's your guy, by the way? Like, who's the guy that is your go-to for your language and your style?
Well, it's changed. I think it was originally Red Garland, and it was originally Relaxin' with Miles Davis Quintet. Like that specific album, that was like, I really would like to play like that. And then, then it was like Wynton Kelly and Tommy Flanagan, Hank Jones. Then it was Mulgrew Miller. I think like I spent a lot of time with Mulgrew's playing and trying to be like him. And then it was like Sonny Clark, Oscar Peterson, all the, all those guys in that same kind of era, pretty much, I guess, except for Mulgrew, but like all that.
The Mulgrew one is the one that stands out.
Right, that's the only one.
Like a lot, yeah, because
I know it's kind of odd. Right, it's like all those guys.
Those like kind of bluesy bebop guys.
Yes, and then Mulgrew Miller, yeah, and he's like the only modern, well, quote unquote modern guy that I really listened to and absorbed. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
I mean, it's just interesting because I was listening to your record, getting ready for this.
Oh yeah? Life in the Basement.
Life in the Basement. Well, because a lot of your tunes kind of have that Ahmad Jamal, Red Garland feel in your writing.
Sure, okay, yeah.
So, I mean, actually, when did you start the writing?
Well, I've always composed music since I was very little, but it was always like, pop music or alternative music. I mean, I wanted to be, Michael Jackson, and then I wanted to be, Trent Reznor, and then I wanted to be Ben Folds. And so that's where I was until, for a long period of time, until I got to school and learned how to play jazz. So I do feel like my compositions kind of retain some of that. And somebody else was telling me was it sort of sounds Vince Guaraldish a little.
I had the same comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you listen to him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, dude. I love Vince Guaraldi.
It's funny because I don't really listen to much Vince. I get that comment.
It's but his stuff is similar in that it's there's a simpleness about it, and that's not bad. It's just there's something easily digestible. And frankly, I would kind of prefer that. I would rather be more digestible and less heady, because I'm not I'm not a masterful composer, and nor am I ever going to be. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but I don't. It's okay that I'm not.
Well, you're not trying to be that guy.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's okay that I'm not Stravinsky. I don't have any. I would rather have stuff that's palatable. But I suppose it is kind of because sometimes I feel okay, yeah, this is palatable, but is it boring? So that's what I worry about sometimes.
Yeah.
Is this boring?
But you have some unique. You have just that nice turn on some of your stuff. It's a little off because you have that. I also noticed that you like 3 a lot too as a writer.
Yeah.
But you have that one tune
that's
on
true.
there that's, is it in 6? Kind of the big 3.
Probably, yeah.
And then you have the slow 7, which nobody really does.
Right? Yes. Yeah. Yes. That's true.
So is that conscious? Is that you trying to say I don't want this to be boring, or is it something that just happens?
I think it just happens, yeah. And it's sometimes I don't realize until after I've composed something, and I'm like, man, that's a pretty good song, and then I'm like, crap, this is in 3, and it's exactly like on my other songs. So because there's a new I've been trying to mix and master this stuff that the trio did a couple years ago, and there's 3 tunes in 3 on that. Man. But it's just what it is.
As far as when you hear something like that, do you want to go back? Because I have known people that sit and they'll say, I've written, they'll take a tune that's a medium tune and then just change the tempo of it, whether or not it works for the tune.
Oh.
Are you one of those that will just, if you feel there's too many tunes in 3, you'll find a way to change it to 4 or something?
No, I just secretly hate myself for it and don't do anything about it. I do go back. I do change compositions, definitely. Kind of minute stuff, or there's some compositions that I've been writing for years, but not actively, and I'm just waiting for the solution to whatever the problem is. Well,
how do you start that process?
I think for me right now, I just write kind of organically. If something comes out, it comes out, but I don't actively write. And then sometimes I'll come to the table with a specific thing. On that album, there's a 12-tone song. The melody is a 12-tone row. A specific thing. But otherwise, I just kind of let it happen. And then, I think I've gotten a little bit better about creating more better melodies. Well, maybe they're not better, but they're more melody, because everything with me is so harmony based. And then I'm like, wait, this melody is just half notes. What am I doing? So I've been trying to so sometimes I kind of go back in and seeing okay, can I put a better melody to this? That's usually what it requires. It's just I've got the harmony figured out. This is what I want. Because for me, music has always been harmony. I just love harmony. And not even crazy harmony, just like
nice things.
That's why I love gospel music, because they just stick to this, like, and everything's so thick. They have these, it's like, yeah, you're not playing a minor 7 chord, you're playing a minor 11 chord every time, and you're just hitting it, and, you have voices doubled, and it's just, like, really sugary, and I like that.
That's kind of where it's not necessarily that the chord changes are complex, but that there's just everything's in there. It's not, like you said, it's not a 7, it's an 11, it's a 13.
Exactly.
That's really for all of them.
Yeah.
That's kind of how they work.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of passing chords, so if you're going to go, like, from the dominant to the tonic, on that dominant chord, you're going to play the root, but then you're going to play the dominant over the third, up to the tonic. You're just going to put all of this movement in. Every melody note gets a voicing kind of vibe.
Is that getting into your writing?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I have a few things, like, on this newer project that are very much like that have just a lot of harmony.
So, as far as getting the sound from the band, how much thought do you put into that, or do you just kind of trust the guys enough?
I just trust them, because I don't have enough knowledge to be able to tell them specifically what to do. Sometimes I have Marty, the bass player, like, playing a specific line, but other than that, I just kind of try and give general notes.
But you're not trying to focus them to get a certain sound most of the time, right? You're just kind of letting their ears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just sort of do what you feel,
How did that Life in the Basement do? Are you out of CDs? Like, have you run out of your first run?
No, I still have, like, a box left.
Yeah.
But that's pretty good considering, I got like 1,000 printed, so I only have the box left. I don't know how many are in a box. And I sold a fair amount online, and so yeah, it did well, for sure. A lot of it's just like friends and family,
Well, then it can't be that much friends and family if.
True. Yeah, that's true.
If you only have one box left, because that's what, 4 or 5 boxes.
I think so, right? Yeah, I think it was 5 boxes when the original shipment came. And then I had sold a bunch in Japan randomly, so they like me over there.
Yeah.
Because I've also noticed that they have paid royalties, like, to ASCAP. So somebody's, like, been licensing some of my music over there. Wow. And I can't figure out, like, who or what, like, I have no idea. It's just like I get, like, a payment from ASCAP for, like, some licensing fee in Japan.
For like a small amount, right?
Oh,
so
yeah. So God knows what it is. I don't know if it's just like, oh yeah, we played it in our restaurant once or something. I don't know.
Okay, so cue stuff.
Yes.
A lot of your parts, like, we didn't change really anything. We didn't go back and re-edit the bass background tracks, but so many of your parts still just fit, even with all the things that we would add on.
Oh, okay.
Like 810 has an organ track now that's played by somebody else, but it still works with your keyboard track.
Oh, cool.
As far as a situation like that where there is no part, the song doesn't really exist yet, and you have 2.5 hours to do 5 tracks, where do you go with that? Like, what's your process on that type of gig?
Well, that's interesting. That's cool that it worked out that way. I was thinking you guys would have just, like, brought in a different, and then told me. It's like, oh yeah, we used some of your stuff, and it's like all different. I don't know if that's. I think that was just like trying to be, simple and just like in the pocket and groove it, just like, the timing of it just making sure that your rhythm's solid, and play nice voicings that are interesting but are not like crazy, because that could be part of it too.
So you just, when in doubt, you just go back to the simple stuff.
Yeah. So right, keep it simple. And just let some of that, especially like Q stuff, which is, very like R&B based. It seems to me a lot of times with the keyboard parts, like it was mostly Rhodes, right? That we use on that is, that stuff's just like, it's almost like a pad. Like it's just kind of hanging. You're just like kind of playing the chords and letting it ring more so than you're doing fancy stuff with it,
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how much of the opportunity you've actually gotten to do a lot of pop recording, but not much.
Not much, no. Well, none. I don't know. I don't think I've done any pop stuff. Well, I guess it would be your definition of pop, but no, not really.
Yeah. I mean, well, just because even on the gig, how, like with the limited free gigs, is it the playing? Have you developed your own parts, or is it still something where you're open every gig?
I think some of it is like having done enough of those gigs, I know what works. So some of it might be like I've kind of developed like a thing that I feel like works well. While still, maybe adding a little thing here or there.
Yeah. Well, just because from talking to Britt, because he's done a lot of the gigs and they don't really rehearse ever.
Right.
Want to. So, I mean, he's developed like parts. Like he does almost the same thing every show to get his thing. But you don't necessarily do that. You just kind of.
I think it's a little bit of that, definitely. Yeah, there's some things that I do kind of the same every time. Yeah, so that is true. I suppose part of it is some tunes I think I treat a little more freely than others, depending. Like the more like New Orleans style-y stuff, I'm more just going for a specific vibe instead of a specific part,
Have you started getting into all that style, or is it just because I know like that's a really tough thing to handle for piano players because it's so different a little bit.
I suppose not really. I mean, if the opportunity came, sure, part of that whole scene too, though, is like dialing in your sounds the right, and like being more of a versatile like keyboard player, like mechanically just knowing how to get to your sounds and have them be the right volume and like have the right transitions. That stuff's kind of tricky. I'm always in awe of keyboardists that do that really seamlessly, where they can they've got their like little synth line here and then suddenly they're back to Rhodes and all this, and it's like, what? How'd you do all that?
Yeah, like the guys that do like left-handed PSYK and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You just have that 80s bass sound.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Right, yeah, it's like they've worked really hard on making that a priority. And that's not something in jazz, well, for a piano player, that's not something you would learn in jazz, because if you're playing the piano, it's like you don't really have, well, that's not totally true. I mean, you have influence over your sound, but not in the same way.
So, I mean, have you got an opportunity to do that with the church, or is the church more of a gospel piano situation?
I have had opportunities. I think it's just dependent on kind of what they're singing, what the occasion is. I mean, I could probably get crazier if I wanted to, and haul in some keyboards and like dial in all this stuff. But the part of that though, you need the rest of the band to really pull that off. And like my church is just, it's kind of just me, you know. So that, you know, if you don't have like the bass and drums laying stuff down, then
yeah,
it's hard to like do all these auxiliary keys parts.
I mean, because it hasn't always been that way, right? You used to have like a full band there.
Yeah, there used to be a full band, and then that ceased to exist.
So what is going on with the new project?
So the new Steve Denny Trio project, which is actually like 2 years old, was we recorded at Tedesco out in New Jersey, and it's very similar to Life in the Basement, the first recording. You know, pretty much all originals. There's 2 covers this time, and it's you know, it sounds similar. It actually kind of bothered me a little bit when we first did the recording, because when I listened back, it was like so similar in my mind to the original album we had done, and I really wanted it to sound different. It's like, man, I've been in New York all this time. I want it to sound like the New York struggle, you know? And it still kind of sounds like introspective Colorado, things are nice kind of vibe. So, but over time, I've come to accept that that's what that recording is, and that it's still worthwhile for me to put out, even though it's like not the project I had kind of envisioned it being. But we also didn't put up, it was, you know, I had booked this time in the studio, and we went in one day and we recorded like 12 tracks. It was just like banged a bunch of stuff out. And so my original intent was to just, you know, record a bunch of stuff, and some of it's going to work and some of it's not, and I'm just going to keep the stuff that works. And so that's what I've done. Pretty much most of it works. And, you know, there were a couple things that didn't, but it mostly like came together. But the other thing that I would like for my trio is to have either a live recording or a like in the same room kind of vibe, like your record, like we talked about, because there's sort of an energy and an interplay that gets lost when you do the isolation booths. And there's sort of a delay, like I just feel like stuff doesn't quite sync up. But the benefit of that is, especially when you're doing original compositions, is everything is really clean that way. So like, you know, all the parts come out really crystal clear, but you kind of miss some of the energy,
some of the grit.
Yeah, and I think that's the case with like most jazz albums, because like, and New York kind of brings it to the forefront, like all of these incredible virtuosic jazz musicians, they put out these albums that are great, but they're always like kind of on the polite side. And then you go see them live and they're just insane, you know?
Like they're very in your face.
Yeah. Like I saw the other night at Smoke, I saw Elu with Joe Farnsworth and Gerald Cannon on bass. And dude, he was just insane. I mean, it was insanity. I've never seen somebody play the piano like that. And then you listen to his stuff, even his most recent stuff, his studio work is really great, but it doesn't capture that. It doesn't capture that like live element.
Do you think it has to do with the way that they're like maybe not that they're doing it in isolation, but that they're doing it in the mixing where they're cutting everything out?
That's true. That could be part of it for sure. Yeah, or things are like compressed a certain way. And there's like a brevity about being in the studio and keeping tracks to a certain length and that kind of thing. And also I think that's useful. Like I did that with this project at Tedesco. I wanted tracks to be shorter. I don't want an album full of 6-minute tracks. Not that that's bad, but I wanted stuff that was like kind of succinct in, the melody and a short solo and the melody. Just, I don't know. There's a great Benny Green album, Source. You know that one? And I forget. It's like some weird label he put that out on, but like literally every track. It's a trio album. Every track is like 3:30 or 4 minutes barely. All of them. And they're just like so succinct and just like to the point. And I kind of thought that was cool. I just like,
having it be that clean cut.
Yes, yeah,
like,
right.
Like the
real
old,
dialed.
Like 45s or
Yes.
whatever they were.
Yeah. Just like real dialed down. And then, do that, and then in tandem do like a live recording that's balls to the wall, like craziness, because that's where you really pick that stuff up. But the problem is recording the right live performance, because you can never predict when the performance is that's like really good and everybody's clicking,
Yeah. I think you probably have to take the band on the road for like weeks.
Yes.
And have it be so that every night is close. But
right. And it's like, how often can we do that this day and age?
Yeah. I mean, why haven't you done more work with the trio? Because you've done some here and there, but you haven't done, especially with Marty and Ben being out here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a lack of, initiative on my part.
I told you I'm dying booking, so I don't blame you at all.
Yeah, it's so miserable trying to book and like harassing people to book your trio, and it also costs money to do. It's like we need our press stuff is so old. Our photos are just, we look like babies. And that's something I'm trying to do this next month, actually, is like get new photographs. But that, costs money. It takes time to do all this. You're trying to like survive in New York, and you're doing a million things. So some people are a lot better at that vibe than others. But yeah, that's what I need to do better for sure.
How have you enjoyed your New York time? I always got don't talk about it much,
I have enjoyed it. I think it was a tough transition moving here, and those first couple years were really rough, as they are for everybody, and so that was not a lot of fun. But it's crazy. Like every year I'm here, I enjoy it more. I like it more. It feels more like home. So I get how people have moved out and just like stuck it out and stay, because there's just something like indescribable about New York. Like I can't. And people back in Colorado, like I don't think they just don't get it, Mm-hmm. I think some of them are just like, man, why do you put up with like all the craziness? And it's true that I complain about all of that a lot, but they also don't see this other side. Like there's just an energy about New York, sort of this like kind of magical, like anything could happen kind of feeling you get being here. So that's cool. And obviously, I think I'm a way better musician than I ever would have been had I not moved out here.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So, as far as the teaching thing goes, you've been doing it privately, a lot of younger students. What are you going to take from that if you go and try to teach older kids? Like if you were to teach privately at a school or something? Or is it just so different?
It's so different. Yeah, little kids are. That's where, and I have respect for it, like from my mom being a kindergarten teacher, like the pedagogy Like that term gets thrown around in higher ed, but it's kind of dumb because you don't. There's no pedagogy in higher ed. You're just teaching material. You know, like the pedagogy it happens when you're teaching little kids and you're tricking them into learning something. Like that's what it. You know, that's where the pedagogy comes in. So that little kids it's a special skill to be able to teach them and to like keep up with them and to change your to not overdo it with them, so you're like switching gears constantly, especially nowadays because kids are so cracked out on their like iPhones and all this stuff, they can barely concentrate. So kids are cool in that way. It's cool to like see them learn, and they're funny, like they're cute, but they're a lot of work. Like a lot of energy goes into getting a little kid to learn something. And I've got kind of like a specific approach that I mostly use, but it's not about material at all. Like I don't get to talk about anything cool with a kid, you know? So that's where like teaching somebody who can learn some things is, you know, beneficial. But even then, you know, I don't know. I do enjoy teaching. I feel like I'm good at it actually, but it's a balance. There's like a threshold of it that I can do and can enjoy, and then much over that is like just I'm done. I don't want to do it.
So this just popped in my mind, but how has the last 7 years really changed your approach? My approach has changed since living here.
To music?
To music
playing?
In general. Like to where it is, like versus how you approached it in college or something.
Yeah.
Like how has your approach to music evolved?
Well, I think New York is because you're running around so much. You're so busy, like in a way that people in any other part of the country just don't comprehend. Like they just will never quite understand what it means to be busy in New York City. Like I'm sorry, it's just different. Is like you have to approach stuff really specifically, you know. So practicing turned into practicing for that specific gig that's that night, or maybe it's tomorrow night. It's almost like cramming for a test, like every day.
Yeah.
Instead of in Colorado, it was a lot of this like conceptual. I'm trying to work on these things and get better at this, and like part of that is Art Landy, you know, famous pedagogue, using that word again, in Boulder. Like he's so conceptual in the way he approaches stuff, which is really cool. But then you get out here and it's like, no, I don't have time. I literally can't, you know, explore all this stuff. I just have to get better at this one specific thing for the gig, you know. And in a way that's like really useful because it, you know, you just have to like go in that vein, and you don't have time to think about other stuff. So that has been the difference in approach, is that I've kind of gone back to a very, I don't want to say myopic, but it's like just focused on a specific thing. And I do more, it's funny, like I like transcribing and just like trying to cram stuff into my playing. I do that more now than I did in Denver, and I think I'm better for it. Like, so now it's just, but that, you know, doing that.
Have you found that your just learning process has shortened?
Yes,
like
that's
it's more direct.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's true. You do so much of it, you can learn stuff a lot quicker, which is very freeing, because you know, it doesn't take you as long to like digest something. And also, you know, I think there's I have less of an ego now about like feeling bad that I didn't know how to do something, or that I was bad. You know, it's like, I think when you're younger, you feel like, you know, it's like, well, I can't I didn't do this thing good, and therefore it means that I'm like really terrible at this specific thing. And it's like, no, you just gotta, you know, do it more. So,
I mean, you kind of, would you say you've detached your personal worth a little bit? To
A little.
Be a little more workman about
yeah,
it?
Yeah, a little. Though that's a really hard thing to do. But yeah, it is odd because you feel like it would be the opposite in New York because you're amongst the best in the world. And so you feel like all of that would be magnified. But nobody cares here. Nobody cares about you, what you do, how you sound. Nobody cares. And that's like really freeing because you could like sound bad at the jam session tonight, and then tomorrow night it's like you're starting from scratch again. Like just there's no carryover. Whereas in a smaller scene, there's more of that kind of like you know reputation. I feel like that's less of a thing here.
What's it been like when you've gone and done clinics? And I'm sure you said some of that. Like,
yeah.
It's probably slipped out.
Yeah. I mean, well, what do you mean?
Like, you've done UNC and CSU when you've gone back there with the trio.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the reaction?
Well, it was kind of different when we did a clinic at CSU, Colorado State, and they loved it. They were like really enthusiastic and asking all these questions. This guy's going to the prom? What's going on? It's like, where's you guys are
weird answer dress.
I feel like she's like, they look kind of like maybe they're famous. I don't know, right? Anyway, yeah, it's. The kids at CSU were like really into the musical things we were talking about.
That kind of stemmed the other bits.
Yeah, and then UNC, I think they were receptive, but I think maybe they thought it was a little dark. Our kind of overview of what the music scene is, and maybe me specifically. I mean, but I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything. I'm just gonna like say what I think the music scene is.
Is it the difference in attitudes between every student that really determines that?
Probably, and also what they've been fed by their, faculty members. It's just. I mean, and again, it's like what, New York brings a lot of things into focus, and you see just a lot of different people striving for stuff in all sorts of different fields, or genres of music, and it's kind of like there's a lot of things you think are important are just not important, once you like get out of your bubble and into a bigger bubble. Because New York's still a bubble, they all are. But yeah, I mean, I think that specific clinic we had talked about just, and somebody had asked me point blank, like how much income I get from like playing gigs, and I was like, not a lot. Like my income comes from teaching little kids Yankee Doodle, And I'm sure some kids, like, I'm not sure that I would want to have heard that in grad school, though you sort of suspect that it's true.
Yeah.
And it's more true now, like, because music is worthless, essentially. Like, it's free.
How was that first experience for you? Because a lot of people's don't go as well as you. Like, I know mine didn't, and I know a couple other guys didn't. Like, their first recording experience is usually a disaster.
Oh, yeah. It helped working at Dazzle because I put it on, like, Dazzle Recordings. They had a little label for a minute. And Donald, the owner of Dazzle, like, really helped me financially with it. So those are two huge things right there that, like, take the pressure off.
Were you going to do it anyways, or did that...
I'm sure I would have. Yeah, I'm sure I would have. Yes. But yeah, that kind of pushed me to sort of get it done and out there. And yeah, it worked. I mean, I'm comfortable with it still. I feel like my playing is a lot better now than it was then, which is good. It's like you would always want to say that. So, but there's a couple moments that I like cringe at some of my playing on it.
Yeah.
But then again, who really cares? You know, nobody's listening that intently, I don't think.
So then, because you do a lot of sideman work too, do you find that your approach changes between your stuff, like as a player? Like, are you able to separate what you wrote? Like, are you able to approach like my stuff the same way you would approach your stuff, or how does that?
That's a good question. I feel like, yeah, and yes and no. I mean, I feel like everybody kind of has their flavor, you know, and maybe some people are better about having like multiple flavors, and it's kind of what we were talking about with like versatility. But at some point, like I'm just gonna approach things a certain way. Not to say that you couldn't be like, yo, Steve, don't do that one thing, or like, hey, think differently for this, but just like from approaching it sight unseen, I'm just gonna treat it like I would other stuff, I think.
It's just interesting because like all my experience is coming from the other side, from the band leading side, so it took me a while to learn to play other people's tunes.
Oh.
So I'm just interested if there's any kind of duality in that.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on like who you're playing with and just trying to read like what they want from you. But also I feel like this day and age, somebody's probably hiring you because they want your particular flavor, you know, versus like going at it, you know, with some kind of different mindset.
Yeah. So you're not trying to necessarily be the total chameleon a little bit.
No, I don't think so, because I don't think I have that capability. I think I definitely have gotten better about being versatile, and I do think I'm kind of probably more versatile in some ways than other people, but not in other ways. So then it's just like, yeah, you know.
How do you approach the pop stuff then? Because it's a different role, right?
Yeah, it is. Pop, I guess, is mostly trying to limit yourself, like don't do too much, you know, which is hard as a jazz musician because you're trying to be like, you know, all over the place. So pop music, especially keyboard, more than any other instrument, I think is like you have to dial back. And it's like, it's okay to just play that chord, you know, or to hold that note out on the organ for the whole piece. You should do like, you listen to that podcast, You Made It Weird, Pete Holmes, he's like a comedian, and he's got a podcast called You Made It Weird, but he always ends with spiritual discussion, talking about spirituality.
You want to talk about spirituality?
Well, no, I don't, but I just was saying, you know, you should think about ending with like a maybe you end with the influences. But we already talked about that.
We already talked about that. Get your own earpiece.
Okay, all right. Sorry, backseat driver over here.